Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. My name is Marty Bennett, president of SMIE Consulting, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions that we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week, we take our questions that we answer here on the Roundup from our newsletter that comes out every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. For those of you who aren't subscribed, you can do so at our website, smieconsulting.org/subscribe. Drop the link in the chat on our Facebook page. I'm also going to put the link to the most recent edition of the newsletter that you would have gotten in your email inbox this Monday morning. It comes out every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. It's a compilation of both social media stories and international education stories, both in the U.S. and globally, and how these overlap, how these two themes often go together in terms, particularly on the recruitment side, but in terms of how you can find out more about studying what the implications of international education, news and stories that are going on in the wider world. And I'll drop in the link if you prefer to get your international education news via LinkedIn. I'm dropping the link to this week's edition of the LinkedIn version that comes out about a half hour earlier on LinkedIn at about 8:30 a.m. Eastern. So same content, just different ways of getting it. Between the two sources, we now have almost 1,500 subscribers in the international ed community that are either getting the email or LinkedIn version in their feeds every week. So glad that you're making that newsletter content a part of your international edification each week. And again, this week's Midweek Roundup is an expansion on some of the themes we see running through that newsletter. And the first question, we'll get right into it today, is how can generative AI be used for good in admissions? Now, there were a couple of news stories last week that spoke specifically to this, and I'm going to drop the links to the 2 different stories. They're actually focused on the college admissions process, in particular, the essays that are required for university admissions. Now, the first article is from Politico, and it's an odd source to be seeing an article about college admissions in Politico, but it talks specifically about how, and oftentimes there's a political slant to everything that Politico does, shocker, but the AI college, what do they call it? The AI college admissions fraud factor. So it's actually a podcast if you wanted to listen to it. Actually, if you'd rather just read the article, you can do that as well. And its focus starts on China, surprise, surprise. And when it comes to the discussion of AI and how it impacts college admissions, they talk specifically how that this now is the first full admission cycle after the end of China's zero COVID policy, which expired in December last year. And that the hope has been that that end of the zero COVID policy is now going to increase the number of new Chinese students that will be flooding back to the United States after about 4 or 5 years of declining enrollments from mainland China, particularly for undergraduate students. So whether that will be seen or not it's hard to tell, but we did see new visas issued to Chinese students for fall entry were up significantly this past year over 2022. So there's hope that there's a rebound coming. It's not probably going to be the full rebound back to 2015 levels of Chinese undergraduates in the United States, but it could soon be coming. But in this article, this Politico article, it talks about how in China now, when U.S. colleges now have been grappling with questions, as the article says, about, quote, how the use of AI-enabled chatbots will change the admissions process for all applicants. It also talks about issues for international students, and that in particular about the essay. And within China, obviously, ChatGPT to normal Chinese students behind the Great Firewall is not accessible because it's a Google, it's a product that is not available globally without a VPN to get you over the Great Firewall. But those VPNs are readily available, and most students can find a way to these tools. But there are also versions of that in local sources in China now with Alibaba and others coming out with their own versions of it. So what it is now a new cottage industry that there are college consultancies now that are trafficking in fraud that quote unquote promise students guaranteed admissions through fake transcripts and ghostwritten statements, and essays, that type of thing. So this is it's a little bit of a slam on Chinese applicants, a little bit probably over the top, but certainly it's reflective of something that's happening globally, not just coming from China. But we do see students looking to use use tools like generative AI, whether Chat GPT or GPT-4 as it is now, or Babel, or some of the other different versions of this that are out there, generative AI programs that are now being used to generate answers to typical essay prompts that are on the Common App or on individual college university statements, requirements for admissions. So it's kind of a point counterpoint. What's going to happen next? You now see some admissions offices employing kind of AI detectors, using AI to detect AI, which is a little bit weird in the first place. But that whole conversation is happening in college admissions offices nowadays for those that require admissions or admissions essays. For schools that don't, this is not even a part of the conversation, at least in terms of how we make admissions decisions. There may be elements, and the second article that we'll talk about in a few minutes does talk about what we can do to help students in terms of how we can use AI to help make our campuses more diverse in the admissions process. So this is another version of view on the AI perspective in admissions. We'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit, but we see in this University World News article that I'll talk about in a second, a version of how AI can be used to detect personality traits that colleges are really trying to identify in college applicants, particularly first-year applicants, as they try to shape their classes. This is also coming in light of the Supreme Court decision that eliminates the ability to use race as a factor in admissions. What are other ways you can determine to create a diverse admitted student class without looking at race? And there are ways and things that individual colleges are using, looking at financial data through zip code information that they can glean from applicants. If they're in an area that typically would be from a lower income area, that's probably a good chance that they can get a more diverse student body if they accept more applicants from certain zip codes. That's been a part of the equation for a lot of universities that haven't been able to use college race as a criteria, particularly in California, for more than a decade now. So this is something that now AI is being used to look at essays, to evaluate essays now, to see if they reflect the kind of data, the kind of qualities that universities identify ahead of time. We want students who are empathetic, who show tendencies towards appreciating diverse opinions and that type of thing. Those are things that now AI can potentially use to help attract and admit the right kinds of students that a college or university is trying to do. And again, when we're talking these kind of tools, we're talking really the upper end of universities that have are really hyper-focused on the diversifying their student bodies, and because they can't use race. So we're looking at a piece of this question here that and answering this question is there good that can come out of using AI from the admission side, not from the student side, but from the admission side, to help craft your class in response to a changing landscape, political landscape, and technological landscape that's now giving tools to us that might help us at those more selective schools that really are using essays as part of that evaluation process now to help dig deeper into the kinds of students you really want to attract. And it's we're also seeing potential changes in future intakes to college admissions processes, where they're going to be turning away from the more general essay prompts that typically appear in the college, on the Common App, for example, or other standardized application forms, to something that's actually more akin to what graduate students have to do, a personal statement that has to be personal about the individual that's applying and have relevant facts and stories and details that would be verifiable, one would assume, about that individual student. So those personal statements probably are going to be the counterpoint to these essay prompts that can really fall victim to more generative AI tools from the student perspective. You also have to look at it from how we should be instructing our students. And again, we don't have any control over the students before they get on our campus. But for my college guidance counselor friends out in the audience, how are you using AI to help improve your students' writing, perhaps, in terms of focusing their attention on key facts and key statistics and key messages that they want to get across in their essays. So these are the kinds of things that we want to have control, but the reality is we don't. And it's a cat and mouse game. We move the target that AI now is available for students to use, and it is being used. Probably more than we realize it on campus. It's already being used, but from prospective students as well. So is our response to it to react in a more negative way we're gonna fight this every chance we get, or is it an opportunity to adapt how you view the tools that you have been using to make decisions in the college admissions process to something that's more akin to a value proposition of, okay, what are we really trying to get out of this evaluation process in finding academically qualified students and X, Y, and Z characteristics of students? Then what's the best way to get at that? And that's something that is a challenge for all colleges and universities these days. But these two articles really kind of give you both sides of a very divisive issue, frankly, for a lot of college admissions offices and our campuses in general about how we respond to these tools that are out there. So a really important piece in terms of that kind of food for thought kind of a question is, are there real positives we can use and leverage in our admissions decision-making process? Is it maybe not even if we don't have essays, is it a way for AI to take over in terms of interpreting grades and test scores and plugging into formulas and that type of thing from scanning material and be able to evaluate that way? That's coming, I'm sure, as well. So there's a lot out there that AI and these technologies will evolve, I'm sure, and develop new capabilities that we haven't even thought of yet. So, but there is some room for good here. In terms of how we are evaluating. The challenge is, will these changes that we make in using AI to detect qualities and characteristics like this University World News article portends that would be appropriate in a way to change the way we do things for campuses that use essays, that use AI to detect the qualities you want in essays that your students are reading? Is the counterpoint going to be, well, have an AI, generative AI piece that writes to those qualities if they're known? And that's one of the things that maybe is the great equalizer, that maybe they won't know what kind of qualities institutions are looking for when they're using generative AI to write their essays. So a lot of interesting discussions happening at conferences around the country, I'm sure, and around the world in terms of these tools that we have. So let's shift gears to our second question, and it's one that I always love to hear from my colleagues about how they respond. And I had an opportunity to chat with our team at UNLV about response times. It's going to be part of an ongoing discussion we're going to have about how we can improve our response times, because when asked, current or international prospective students were asked in recent surveys, and there's one that is highlighted in an ICEF Monitor article that I've just posted. It's from an ICEF Insights magazine that's going to be published this month in November. This article came out last week, and it's content from Keystone. Keystone has been in the business of email comm flow improvements, working with institutions to take over that process in a lot of cases. but working with institutions and how they respond to students, when they respond. So the Keystone folks have been in this field for a while, so they're not just coming out this blind with this study, and they have very focused questions that they ask that kind of lead to the kinds of the answers that I think are going to be most valuable for university folks. Now, Keystone in this year asked over almost 24,000 students across 195 countries how universities could improve their communications. One of the top 3 recommendations was speed of response. That 24% had identified speed of response was a top 3 concern in terms of how they could improve, along with availability of information and quality of response. So quality does factor into this, not just speed. So in terms of the most important things that universities could do in terms of how they respond. And some of us might have auto-generated responses that come in if we have a intake form on our sites or any standard inquiry that comes in. Maybe there's an auto-generated email that goes right back out just to make sure that that student is acknowledged and seen as, oh yeah, we thank you for your inquiry. What this article talks about in terms of the results of this survey is that, and this is the kicker, 62% of students expect a response from a university within 24 hours or less. And that's an increase of 21% over 2022. So in the last year, this means basically from 41% up to 62% now expect of students, prospective students, expect a response within 24 hours. How many of you can, what is a response? Some of it might, if you have an auto-generated, does that count as a response? Probably, but then that might go to the reasons why they want quality responses, not just, and personal responses, not just a response, that they expect a response within 24 hours. So they're getting increasingly impatient, and surprise, surprise, this generation of students, this Gen Z or Gen Alpha, as we're entering into the first groups of Gen Alpha students, are not probably college age yet, but the Gen Z students certainly are very impatient bunch. They expect answers right away because they grew up in a digital world where they could get all their answers right away, online at least acquiring Google or whatever search engine they choose to use. So your prospective students now are 21% more likely to say, we want a response. Now 62% of them are saying they want a response within 24 hours. How many of you can put your hands up now and say you can give a personalized response to every student inquiry within 24 hours? Not going to be a whole lot of folks out there doing that right now. But it's at least something to shoot for. And that obviously has to do with bandwidth that you have in your staff time in your offices. That has to do with, if you don't have an automated response, what is the process? We have, when you get leads from college fairs, how do those get handled? Do they get an automatic response once you've put them into your system? Thanks for meeting us at the fair, blah, blah, blah. Does that start that conversation? So whatever that point of contact is, 62% want a response within 24 hours. So that is the expectation from students, and that it takes, in terms of looking at the data, most universities are failing to respond promptly. A mystery shopping research project that was conducted by one of Keystone's partners, Edified, involved 128 universities, and that found that 1 in 4 student inquiries received no response, zilch from university. That's shocking. That students are requesting information from you, and 25% of you never respond. That's atrocious. I know there are universities that will say it's 2 or 3 days that are in terms of a response time to respond to a prospective student inquiry. That's clearly outside the window of what the expectation is from students, and that's something that we want to. Maybe you have an auto response that says that when students do inquire that way, that does go out and say, hey, our standard response time is 2 to 3 days. And if that's the case, at least you're getting that out there and let them know that we recognize you have inquired. We're going to get back to you. We can't do it right now or within 24 hours. But at least have something that when an inquiry comes in, get it out to them and say, hey, We acknowledge that you have a question and concern or you want information. We'll get to you as soon as we can within a certain time frame. And then that helps to manage those expectations, because is responding in 24 hours realistic? In most cases, no, with a personalized response. But for most of our universities, it's at least 75% of us are responding in any length of time. So I think it's really important that when you look at students who make inquiries before they apply, because we've all talked about the stealth applicants, they actually only represent about 17%, according to this UniQuest research, that if they're acquiring they represent 17% of all enrollments, that if they have a great inquiry experience in terms of response time, that increases their chances of accepting admission offers more than twice as often as others that don't have a good inquiry experience if they do ask those questions. So there's 17% of students that are making inquiries to you directly, and these are kind of the dreams that you hope you get, considering how many of your applicants come as stealth applicants. That 17% of your potential applicants are asking questions. Only 17%. So that means that we talked about the website, how well your website communicates your value to your prospective student audiences a couple of weeks ago. But this one certainly reinforces that case, is that for those that you do get inquiries from, you have to treat those like gold. They are actually asking for help before they apply. And those are the ones that you hope that you have the opportunity to interact with and convince them that, yes, we're the right institution for you. And then it leads them to a better experience through the admissions process and onward. So great data from the folks at Keystone through their recent survey, and also through the Edified project there. So I really recommend that if you haven't read that article, it's very much worth your time. It's a quick read, but the data points that you can share internally within your admissions offices, internationally in particular, I think would be very valuable, at least eye-opening to say the least, in terms of, are you really doing a good job in terms of meeting those expectations? So really important to see that in terms of, does speed matter when communicating with prospective students? Absolutely. And the fact that 62% now expect a response within 24 hours should be the light bulb that goes on for all of us in international admissions. So let's get right to our final question of the day. This is a fun one. Is Canada getting its act together internationally? Now, for most of my U.S. colleagues, this conversation may be a little bit strange, because you've heard me talk in the past about how in Canada they have policies that really open the door wide for international students and provide a very clear pathway to becoming permanent residents. And we talk about this all the time, and we've talked about how their numbers of international students in Canada has been going through the roof in the last 3-4 years. Even through the pandemic has been escalating considerably. That there were 800,000 in Canada, international students in Canada last year. They're going to be hitting 900,000 in calendar year 2023. They're pushing 1 million, folks, in the next year if we're not careful, or if they're not careful, depending on how you look at it. So the dynamic of international students applying to Canadian colleges and universities is very different than it is here in the U.S. There are less than 100 colleges or universities, bachelor's degree granting institutions in Canada. There are a couple, 300 vocational colleges, public and private, that the numbers of students that attend, the international students that attend the university level courses, is about half of the total. I don't have exact numbers, but I've been told from reliable sources in Canada that about half of international students in Canada are at the university level, so say roughly 400,000 from last year's data, and roughly half are in this vocational program, in the public and private vocational colleges in Canada. So another 400,000 there. Now, what has happened in recent weeks is a number of different things. Canada has really been exploding all over the news with challenges as the fall term has begun. Certainly there was some issues that happened over the summer, late summer, where there was a diplomatic spat between India and Canada. And India is Canada's #1 source of international students, has been for many years now. that could potentially, this diplomatic spat could lead to a decrease in the number of Indian students going to Canada, and that could be devastating for some of these colleges, not necessarily the universities, but for the colleges for sure. And the reason being is part of this diplomatic spat involved India kicking out 20 or 40, I can't remember the exact number, diplomats, Canadian diplomats working in India, and those diplomats have responsibilities for vetting student study permits, our equivalent of student visas. So in the largest country for international students coming to Canada, that there's now a prohibition or a significant reduction. I think it was over half of staff had to leave the country because they were no longer part of this diplomatic tit for tat. India called for parity in the number of diplomats each country could have in each other's country. So Canada obviously had far more in India than India had in Canada. So that led to this expulsion, if you will, of all these, more than half of the diplomatic corps for Canada and India. So what that's been on the radar. You've heard the stories of all the challenges on Canadian universities with housing. We've seen this Cape Breton University in the Atlantic provinces. Has over 9,000 students now. 70%, 9,100 students right now. 75% of those 9,100 are from overseas. Vast majority of those are from India. As a result, they've been having huge problems with housing, huge problems with shortage of classroom space. So as a result, that university has now planned to reduce its overall enrollment from 9,100 to 7,000 students within the next 4 years. And you know where those reductions are going to come from? They're going to come from the international audiences because they're on over a bigger domestic cliff than we have in the United States there in terms of that province, that area of the Atlantic provinces in Canada, declining populations. The international students are helping to keep their numbers up. And obviously it's gone too far in the other direction now, and that those are going to be dropping here. So you saw an increase, and one of the reasons why this particular university, Cape Breton University, is going into reducing mode is they had an increase of 57.4% in their enrollment in 2023 compared to 22. That's just phenomenal. How did that ever happen? It's happened because of booms in international applicants. So even though universities are not immune from the kind of challenges that these policies have really gone unchecked for a while. There's the articles that I'm sharing. The first one is from the PI that talks about Canada's new institutional framework, trusted institutional framework. I'll talk about that in a minute. The second article is about the Cape Breton University that we just mentioned. The third is the policy that India has undertaken or advice actually, that experts in India, again, Canada's #1 source of international students are from India, and this is from experts in India that write about this for Canada-bound students, that they are being told, according to this article, explore other countries. Experts advise as Canada partially halts visa services. There was a partial halt of visa services in the past week. That they halted it in 3 cities, Bengaluru, Mumbai, and Chandigarh, and they are operating only in New Delhi that in this past week. So that's forcing kind of a bottleneck. That's part of the diplomatic changes here that we were talking about earlier, the reduction in Canadian diplomats allowed in India. That's reducing the in-country bandwidth to process visas. Now they're only being handled in New Delhi. So that is forcing educational agents and other agencies that advise students about study abroad options. Hey, keep your options open now. It's not just Canada. You can't just look at Canada anymore because you might not be able to get your visa processed in time. But the counterpoint to that is by the IRCC, that's the Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Canada government organization that is expressing their intent that that they do expect to return to normal by early 2024. And the reason they say that is that they're going to offshore some of the visa processing. These immigration staff members that have been working in India are being reintegrated into offices in Canada and the Philippines to process specifically the Indian student or study permits coming in, just as a way to balance out that expulsion of the diplomats. They're not losing their jobs, they're just not able to do their jobs in India. So Canada's response is, okay, they're going to do some of them are going to be in Philippines processing visa study permits, some are going to be back in Canada doing that. So they're saying that they'll be back up to speed by early 2024. So maybe that's a light at the end of the tunnel for them. But the challenge here, again, is this new, the recognition that kind of what Cape Breton has done is they're capping enrollment. They're going to reduce their total enrollments over the coming years, is that you also see the national government's realizing, okay, we've finally got to step in and do something here. They've introduced this recognized or trusted institution framework through which universities, in particular, that have been providing adequate outcomes for the success of international students, in their words, can now be on this trusted path. They're not those. What does that mean to provide adequate outcomes for the success of international students? That's not spelled out yet. I'm sure there'll be ongoing conversations and articles about that. But this trusted institutional framework is meant to get after the bad actors out there, to punish the bad actors, and to reward the good ones, according to the Mark Miller, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. So it's taking action against all the students that have who've come into the country with fake documents, to fake admission letters, to get their study permits. That this is something that was I realized a couple of years ago, but I'm sure many of my colleagues now, when they will see articles like this, the details of which are Canada will now be, and get this to everybody in a post-SEVIS world. We in the U.S. we've had this happen since SEVIS was introduced. Even before that, when the I-20s that we issue as institutions are part of a government database that track all the admissions information that institutions provide. It's already there and is evaluated by consular affairs at posts around the world, U.S. embassies and consulates when they meet with students for the interview. We do things in the U.S. that most other countries don't do. Most important of which is that in-person visa interview for those who've never had U.S. visas before. That's something that no other country is really doing, none of the other major destinations. Others just have offices that process all the paperwork, visa paperwork. We also, unlike Canada, we've had a system in place where institutions, the letters of admission, LOAs, that a lot of Canadian institutions have that issue. There's no check on that, as that they're actually verified as official from before the students get their study permits. There's no way for that to happen, but now they're going to be implementing that process. We'll see some of that. So I said in my post this week on this topic, it's an article that just came out this week. It says, "Welcome to the 21st century, Canada." This is something that's been happening for quite a while, and now it's Canada that we've been doing for quite a while in the U.S. Not that we've been perfect, but it certainly helps eliminate a lot of the fraud, particularly as you see in these Canadian cases where we've had students show up with fraudulent letters of admission to get onto college campuses in Canada. So is Canada starting to get its act together? Just about, yeah. So it's moving in the right direction. So we'll see what impact that has on overall numbers, to get down some of the fraud and some of the abuse in the system there. And other institutions like Cape Breton will start to adjust their policies accordingly and realize, well, we've overcommitted, we don't have the housing space, we don't have the classroom space, we got to cut back. So what does that mean financially for institutions in Canada? Whole nother question, but I'm sure we'll be discussing this again in the weeks and months to come. That's all we have for you this week on the Midweek Roundup. Appreciate your attention today, and hopefully you found a few nuggets this week that you can take back and implement at your home campuses. So until we speak again, next week I'm going to be attending the CAIE conference in Las Vegas. Very happy that it's a conference we've been working on hosting for the last couple of years at UNLV, where I work. I work remotely for them. So that conference is happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. So I'm going out Sunday, coming back next Friday. So we're going to be meeting with future partners, current partners, people we're going to be signing agreements with that week. We're hosting the opening reception on our campus. The conference itself is happening at the Mirage Hotel on the Strip in Las Vegas. So very excited about next week. A lot of effort's gone in by our entire international team and campus to make this event happen next week. But I'll be coming to you from the conference next week, next Wednesday. So look for another live shot from the conference floor next week for me from the CAIE conference. And that's the Conference of the Americas for International Education. So in case you're wondering what that acronym is. So institutions from Canada all the way down to Chile, everywhere in between, including the Caribbean. There's even a delegation of about 26 university representatives from China coming. There's pavilions for Costa Rican universities, Brazilian universities, a very robust conference, about 600 people, I think, will be attending this one. So our version of EAIE or API happening next week in Las Vegas. So that's where I'll be. Looking forward to chatting with you then. Have a great day. Cheers.